It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. My name is Richard Paxman, and I'm the CEO of Paxman Scalp Cooling. And we are the world's leading scalp cooling manufacturer. I'm now going to play you a short video, and I think this really demonstrates the impact of what we do.
Shining, gleaming, steaming, flaxen, waxen. Give it down to their hair, shoulder length or longer. Here, baby, there, mama, everywhere, daddy, daddy, hey. Blow it, show it, loud as rock and roll.
So as I said, we're leaders in this field, and it's really about making a difference for so many patients out there who lose their hair through chemotherapy treatment. I think to try and understand why hair loss is so important, or why scalp cooling is so important, I can provide you with some statistics. It is a well-known fact that actually over 75% of patients believe that hair loss is the most feared side effect of chemotherapy treatment. It can often lead to social isolation, and it is considered incredibly traumatic. I think what we also see is that it can affect a person's self-image. It can prevent them going to work. It can prevent them from carrying out normal social activities. And then one incredible statistic, which is very concerning, is actually 1 in 10 patients, or 10% of patients, sorry, will refuse chemotherapy because of this side effect. So I'm going to tell you about why we do what we do. I think that's incredibly important to understand the culture of our business. When I was 10 years old, my mum was diagnosed with late-stage breast cancer. My mum was 34, beautiful curly hair, 4 young children, and it wasn't her prognosis that gave her the most fear. It was the fact that she was going to lose her hair. Our local hospital in Huddersfield were actually offering something called scalp cooling all those years ago. But unfortunately for my mum, it didn't work. And that was the first time she was really affected by her disease, the first time she cried. Seeing that distress, my father started to look at, well, why didn't it work? What can we do for future patients around the world to make it work better? So we've dedicated the last 20 years, and my father and his brother Neil Paxman developed our first system in 1997. Unfortunately, we lost my mum about 20 years ago, so we're incredibly passionate about why we do what we do. So we've had some changes in the last just over 12 months. Back in June 2017, we actually took the business public to help fund our expansion into the United States. So we have Paxman AB, which is our parent company. We have an incredibly strong board, some of you may already know these names, who provide a wealth of experience to support our management team. Paxman AB owns Paxman Group, which then effectively owns Paxman Coolers Limited, our manufacturing and distribution arm, and then more recently our US subsidiary, Paxman US Incorporated, based in Houston. So how does scalp cooling work? So to understand how scalp cooling works, first we need to know a bit about chemotherapy. So chemotherapy is designed to attack the cancer cells. Cancer cells are rapidly dividing, and unfortunately our hair cells are very similar, so rapidly dividing at any one time. So unfortunately the chemotherapy attacks the hair cells, damages them, and the patient's hair will fall out. So what we do is we cool to protect. And by cooling, what we firstly do is induce vasoconstriction. So in other words, we narrow the blood vessels that are carrying the chemotherapy to the hair follicles. What we also see at those lower temperatures is reduced cell division, so less targeted effect of the chemotherapy. And then more recently, we've understood more through the cell biology that we do, where we've developed our own cell culture models. And we actually see that less drug diffuses through the cell membrane. So therefore, again, protecting those hair cells from the toxic chemotherapy. So we're on our 4th generation of scalp cooling system now. It's a very simple device to use. It's quite small and compact and fits very well inside or by an infusion chair. What we do is we cool the patient's scalp for 30 minutes before the chemotherapy, during the chemotherapy, and 90 minutes afterwards. So we pump a special liquid coolant around either a reusable cap in many markets, or also a single patient use cooling cap, which is a new business model that we are operating in a number of markets. So the burden of cancer. Unfortunately, cancer affects so many people around the world. In fact, over 40 million new diagnoses every single year, and this is only growing. So that means there's a huge opportunity for us in this room to help people keep their hair, have some normalcy and some control. So where are we today? So we've been doing this for nearly 20 years. We've treated tens of thousands of patients, and we continue to treat tens of thousands of patients every single year. We operate in about 56 countries throughout the world, but really actively in about 30 markets. And we've installed over 3,000 scalp cooling systems over those years. But what I will show you is the real growth that we've experienced in the last couple of years. In terms of where we are, again, this sort of depicts the idea of the different countries that we operate in. The United Kingdom still being our #1 country. We have over 1,000 installations in the UK, 98% of the National Health Service and private sector using our equipment. So that really demonstrates what we can do in every single market around the world. Second biggest market now is the US, even though we've only been active for 12 months in the United States of America. And we have a strong foothold in places like Australia, the Netherlands, France and Germany are growing, but the opportunity is huge. We operate a number of different business models. The primary model is our direct sales in the UK and then to the French market, so we sell capital equipment. We use a distribution model for many parts of the world, and that's really where we sell capital equipment directly to the distributor, and then the distributor sells that capital equipment to the hospital. We've understood that we need to start to change and reevaluate our business models and really look at future growth and sustainable growth. So one of the new markets that we've entered is into the US, and we've actually set up a direct company, so Paxman US Inc., where we install equipment on a free of charge basis or on a low lease cost, and we actually sell the treatment and a single patient use cooling cap to the patient. So as you can imagine, that creates a much greater chance for recurring revenues and substantial growth. In terms of our Q3 income statement, we're delighted at our performance to date, albeit still a small company, but some huge growth potential. So if we look at Q3, sales of 60 million SEK, that's up by 93% from the corresponding Q3 of 2017. If we look at sales for the period, so January to September 2018, we're nearly at 40 million SEK. Again, 78% improvement from that period of time following years. So some substantial growth. As you can see, our costs of sales have obviously increased as we've sold more, but we're still maintaining a very, very strong gross profit margin. Although we have seen increased in personnel cost, our personnel have increased from over 20 to nearly over 40 people now. We still have these very much in control. The same with other operating expenditure. The main cost relates to our expansion into the US and actually setting up our US company. Most importantly, what you'll see is our net losses reducing, and we're now at a point for Q3 of just over 300,000 SEK loss. I think this is an interesting slide and really depicts the growth that we're seeing in the marketplace. So from Q1 to Q2, 15% improvement in revenues, and a large proportion of that is coming from the United States. And then from Q2 to Q3, a 27% growth, which I'm sure you'll agree is impressive. I think overall there's a 40-odd% growth from Q1 to Q3. If you take a look again then at other external costs and personnel costs, now we've set up the infrastructure, there is not significant growth in these costs in comparison to our turnover. We built the right infrastructure in the United States to substantiate impressive growth. And again, as I pointed out earlier, we've seen some impressive reductions in our net losses. So to cash flow, incredibly important for the business, of course. What we've started to see is a real improvement in our cash flow activities. One of the biggest sources of our use of cash are actually our installation of equipment into the United States. So since the opening of the US business, we've invested 20 million SEK into scalp cooling equipment and placing that, as I said before, on a lease or free of charge basis. The actual operating businesses are now cash flow positive, but it is the investment that we have into the stock and the infrastructure which is creating the biggest tie-up in cash. What we have done is we've increased our credit line to now 150 million SEK. Or 50 million SEK, I do apologise, I am working in sterling. So looking at where we've installed equipment. So we now have 395 systems installed just in the first 3 quarters. Now this really is, again, impressive growth. If you think to date we've installed 3,000 systems over a 20-year period, over 10% of that growth has come from the first 3 quarters of this year. Key markets, again, of course, include the United States of America, but we really have looked at many other markets and continue to grow impressively. This is our order book, including installs. So again, to the end of the year, we have an order book of another couple of hundred systems. Again, 100 of these into the US. But then it's to show that we are not just focusing our efforts in the US. There is still a lot of activity overseas with a number of our distributors. So the United States of America, of course, this is a key growth market. It is the largest healthcare market in the world. It has 1.6 million new cancer cases every single year, and a large proportion of those will require chemotherapy treatment. Since August 2017, we've installed over 300 scalp cooling systems into 170 locations in the US. That's across 30 states. And I'm very, very proud of our actual activity and looking at what others are doing in the marketplace. We are definitely leading the way in the US. Our biggest users are in Texas, but there is interest from all across the US. Here is our revenue curve. So since Q3 of 2017 to Q3 2018, we've seen 85% growth in income. So as I said, to understand the income growth in the US, we install equipment either free of charge or on a low lease cost, and then we actually sell directly to the patient. So the patient buys a single patient use cooling cap, and they also then pay for the number of treatments that they are having. The average treatment per patient is around $1,500. One of our key focuses now is that we have got a fantastic install base, as you can see from the 300 systems installed, but we want to drive utilization of those systems. And we're going to be doing that, and already are doing that, through working with the insurers, so getting reimbursement, so it goes away from being a self-pay treatment to being paid for by the commercial insurers, Medicaid, Medicare, who are the government insurers. In addition, we're working with advocacy groups, and we're really, really building on awareness. So actually, when patients are first diagnosed, they're learning about scalp cooling and the ways to prevent hair loss, which is incredibly important. And then our interactions with physicians and nurses is phenomenal. We are really, really engaged with a large network of medical professionals and key opinion leaders, really to make this treatment known to the patients and ultimately see much faster growth. We're already seeing Octobers and Novembers showing strong improvements. So I'm talking now about the US market specifically, and this really does highlight the potential growth for the US. So we're only scratching the surface at the moment, and we've got a long way to go. But month on month, we're seeing this growth. Even if we only saw 5% of the high-risk patients who will have chemotherapy, that's potential revenue of nearly $17 million per annum. For 10%, over nearly $34 million. And only if we get 25% of those high-risk patients, that's $85 million per annum revenue. And this is really achievable. So we're working hard, as I said, of improving utilization and ultimately getting reimbursement for the patients so it's not a self-pay treatment in the future. So we've not got to forget the rest of the world, and we certainly aren't. So we've invested heavily over the last couple of years in our international team and our distribution network to support that growth. So here, if you look, this is a recent conference in Mexico. So we've just launched our first licensing deal with Teva, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. Now, they're incredibly interested in what we do and have already launched the business in Mexico in November, where we actually install equipment, again on a free of charge basis, and then we charge the patient per use. So again, another opportunity to create faster and reoccurring revenues. I'm very proud to be working with Teva as a smaller business. Having that relationship with a large oncology drug manufacturer really gives us that sort of substantial recognition that scalp cooling is incredibly important, and now everyone is starting to listen how important it is. Japan, being the second largest healthcare market in the world, it cannot be ignored. In fact, for the last 8 years, I've been working on the Japanese market. It has been a relatively slow process, which has involved a lot of investment, both from our part and our Japanese distributor, and also clinical trials. Our clinical trials have completed, and very soon we should have shonin approval. Shonin approval is their regulatory standard, very similar to FDA. So in the first quarter of 2018, we're looking to launch our business in Japan. Now that's an incredible feat for, again, a relatively small business, and we're excited to launch in that market. It's slightly different business model again. We'll sell the capital equipment to our distributor, but even better than that, what we'll also sell is our single patient use cooling caps to the Japanese patients. So ultimately, again, we have sales of capital equipment, which is great for cash flow, but we'll also see recurring revenues from cap sales. So new business models really to emphasize that growth in the business. We then have the Chinese market. And this is not a market to be ignored. For some time, we have stepped back and not looked at the market. But for 2019, we're going to strategically review and look to find out the best opportunities there are in that market. We've over 300 million insured patients every single year. That is a vast opportunity. So we're in talks with a number of different organizations, as well as the FDA, to look at the best opportunity in China. So watch this space. The rest of the world continues as well to be a main focus. So we are not just focusing all our eggs in one basket, as we say in England, into the USA. We are heavily investing in exhibitions and working with clinical trials and key opinion leaders throughout. I think another thing that's really important about our business is that we are always wanting to improve. We want to be the best we can be and provide the best patient experience possible. Unfortunately, scalp cooling doesn't work for everyone, but it is our commitment to ensure that we get better at what we do. Through an impressive R&D pipeline, we're very confident that we will continue to not only improve the technology, but improve other supporting areas of scalp cooling, whether that be the biology, whether that be the cooling cap fit, whether that be personalization. So very excited for the future of scalp cooling, and as a business we will continue to show the investments we have made over the years and put that back into improving what we do for our patients. So I just want to say, I think Paxman is a wonderful financial investment. And it really is. There's some exciting potential growth. There's 2 of us in the world at the moment, and we're really, really leading the way. But I think what's also important, and as you can see from all these faces on here, you're having a huge social impact, helping tens of thousands of patients every single year keep their dignity, keep that normal life, and feel good about themselves while going through chemotherapy treatment. So I believe now it's for a Q&A session.
Well, first, an applause maybe. Thank you so much, Richard. So why do you want to stand here in front of these investors and present your company right at this time?
So I think it's very important for us to build awareness in the Swedish market. So historically, we are a UK-based company, but we are now a public company in the Swedish market, and that's important that you're aware of us, aware of what we're doing, and raise our profile.
And how come you're listed here in Sweden?
So it really dates back from about 1999, when our originally VC investors, Simon, approached my father at the time to potentially invest in our family business, and they actually did. So back in around 2000, they invested some money into our company. So we've always had a Swedish link. So it seemed appropriate, and we had a fantastic board at the time who had experience of raising money on the Swedish Stock Exchange. So, and our competitor is also listed on the Swedish Stock Exchange, so our First North Nasdaq. So that helps as well.
But you say you're the leading one, so how are you leading?
So I think you could look at it in a number of ways. Both companies are doing a great job and supporting one another in terms of clinical data and awareness. But if you look at where we're at in terms of number of installations around the world, number of ongoing clinical trials, there are a number of things that I believe we are putting us at the forefront of scalp cooling.
But do you feel that this competition is a threat, or is there room for everyone?
There's definitely room for everyone. It's healthy competition.
And also, I read in your reports that you say that you remain a close family business. And what does this mean for the way that this company is run?
So I think when we talk about being a family business, it's very much about the passion that some of the original family members have within the business. But I think we've also got to look at being a professional business, and that still rings very true. So we've changed a lot over the last 20 years. In fact, I think how the business operates is possibly unrecognizable. But what you will still see throughout that is the why we do what we do, and the real passion of why we do what we do, which ultimately benefits the patient.
And speaking about the family, we'll pass over to what does the ownership look like for this company?
So the current ownership is around 50%, less than 50% of family, and then the remainder is built up with different investors, some industrial investors and some smaller individuals.
And also, you're listed here in Sweden, but how big is your business here in Sweden?
So we have a limited amount of business here in Sweden. Unfortunately, although our competitor is Swedish, we would have hoped that this market would have proved a bit more exciting for us in terms of a real interest. But there's been a reasonable amount of barriers over the years in Sweden for scalp cooling. But we're very hopeful to change that very soon. We're going to continue to invest in the market and raise our profile in the market, and hopefully get scalp cooling available for the patients in Sweden, because it's so important, and in a way you're behind in that respect.
So it's not available to anyone in Sweden?
There are a few installations, but it's not widely used, not like the United Kingdom.
Är det någon i publiken som har en fråga? Does anyone in the audience want to raise a question? Yeah.
How about sales? Do you use distributors or own salespeople?
How about the sales? Do you use distributors, or do you have your own salespeople?
In Sweden or around the world? Around the world. So historically we used a very basic distributor model, as you can understand, a small business needing impact in multiple countries. The best opportunity was to find oncology specific medical device distributors. So that's how we work in most countries, but we are slowly reviewing that and understanding where the opportunities are. So for example, in the United States we have our own company, and we have some infrastructure that's run by McKesson, but they are not our distributor, and I think there's some confusion sometimes there. So they really provide us services such as pharmacy and a call center and logistics.
Any more questions in the audience? Not for the moment. Also, you said you're kind of changing your business models. You have different solutions in different markets, but what are the? I mean, of course, there are pros with just handing over the equipment and charging for the use, but are there any cons?
Well, the cons would be, I suppose, the infrastructure required to carry out that service, but we've got a pretty impressive infrastructure that we've set up. So there's higher setup costs in order to actually provide that level of service. But once you've made that investment, you know, we can grow at a very fast rate without additional overhead.
Mm-hmm. And also, if we look at the situation today, why would this be a good point of time for these people to invest in you?
So as I sort of said earlier, we're scratching at the surface. So although we believe we've done a lot and we've come a long way, there is so much more to do. And we are proving our track record quarter by quarter, substantial growth. So it really is an interesting investment at this moment in time.
And also, you mentioned Mexico a few times. Why is this deal important? Is this market interesting, or?
The market is interesting, as it's got a reasonably decent private oncology sector. But I think most importantly, it's the fact that we're working with Teva, large pharmaceutical company, lots of opportunity in other parts of the world. So I see strategically this could be a very strong relationship going forward.
Could you make more of these kinds of agreements?
Yes, we certainly could do. So one of the most important things for us at this moment in time is testing it, making sure we've got it right, because it is new to us. But once we've done that, I'm sure there'll be lots of opportunities elsewhere to support similar agreements.
Is your phone ringing? Are you achieving? No, are you getting interest from outside, or you need to chase them down?
So you mean for well, my phone never stops. There's
That's a good sign.
There's an amazing interest. Yeah,
Yeah.
I need more hours in the day perhaps, but our team is growing to support that. As I said, we've gone from sort of early 20s to now over 40 people in 12 months. So we're making significant investments. But it's an exciting time.
Mm-hmm. Exciting time. Okay. And what would you say? What are your biggest risks or challenges going forward?
I think the biggest challenges for me are reimbursement in the United States. It's a complex and long process, and we have to be patient. But at the same time, it's the
You mean insurance companies reimbursing?
Yeah, of
patients?
course.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's our biggest opportunity. So although it's a big challenge, we will get there. It just takes time.
It just takes time. Okay, well, I guess then we will see. So thank you so much and good luck on your journey.
Thank you very much. Thank you.